In this video, I'm going to share with you exactly how you can grow your business, and it starts with doing this one thing right, and that is putting yourself in the position to be the employer that candidates want to work with. Now then becomes the goal of finding those candidates that are rockstar candidates. So you can see the guide right here. I'll just speak about it. You can download it, linked in the description below. The first thing I'd recommend you do to be a rockstar employer, conducting these interviews with rockstar candidates that you actually really want to work within your business, is preparation. That is preparation for the first interview, regardless of what position this interview is for, should always consist of reviewing the candidate's scheduling question sets for vetting ahead of time. What the heck am I talking about? Well, that's just to say you can use an application like Calendly or some other scheduling tool to actually put questions in there that will help you vet the candidate and also prepare the candidate for your interview. So reviewing their resume briefly, obviously, is something you should do. Make sure the person is skilled enough for the position on paper, but then on the first interview, you want to get to know them as a person to see if they'd be a good fit. And in the beginning, for about the first 15 minutes or so of that scheduled interview, I suggest you do all of these things. Review that, also review the candidate evaluation matrix, and all of this is going to help you understand who this person is that you're speaking to. So from start to finish, plan about 45 minutes of time to prep, including the 30-minute interview. Now, I suggest that to be a rockstar employer that candidates want to work with. And when you put these systems into action that we're talking about, hopefully you'll have the same results that we did and that we continue to have. And in that PDF, by the way, there'll be a legend when you go through it that'll describe, based off of color, what things that I actually say and what things that I suggest just as commentary for you so that you can form it into your own words. But the first thing that I would do, and when you come out with it, is say, hey, my name is Billy. It's great to meet you. Congrats on being selected for this interview, and thank you for taking the time to interview with us and our company. Now, you want to presuppose that they've already done some research, because a rockstar candidate will do research so that they can get to know who you guys are as an organization outside of the interview, where you want to also then give them an opportunity to get any questions answered. So I say something like this. As far as a little overview that I give them, hey, as you know, I'm Christian, the co-founder of Real Estate Investing Made Easy. And what you may not know is that I've been investing in real estate since 2009, and I've also been teaching others how to do the same thing for over a decade. And my partners and I started this company alongside our investing company to showcase what we're doing and what's working. And now we're looking for a hire for this position, whatever the position is, right? And it can be, you can also say another hire. That is, if it's a cold caller, then you can say, we're looking for another cold caller within the next X, 2 weeks, month, whatever it is. And this is putting that information in their ears so they can understand what expectation you have, so they can be better equipped that if this is the first interview you're having, we're thinking, man, I need a job tomorrow. Well, if you're not hiring for another 2 weeks, that might not be a good fit for their timeline. But if that timeline's okay with them, at least you told them ahead of time, so you let them know either way. And then you want to address questions. And that's number 3 in that outline if you have it, which I would recommend you download and follow along with this. So you say, hey, to ensure that this is a positive interview experience, I'll share an overview of what you can expect over the next 20 to 30 minutes. But before I do, are there any questions that you have for me, either about the role or about the company before we get started? And if that question that they ask is related to something that you're going to be covering, you don't have to feel the need to answer right away. Say, hey, that is a great question. In fact, that's actually why we're going to cover a little bit later in the interview. So I appreciate you asking that. And then with that, you can tell them what's on the agenda. Say, hey, here's an overview of the meeting. I want to share it with you. So there's no mystery of where we are in this interview, and you can gauge what's coming next and also formulate your questions as such. If you're organized and structured, it's going to put you in a position that employees want to work with you, because no employee, for the most part, unless they're really entrepreneurial minded, can thrive in a disorganized structure. So you definitely want to share this, because subconsciously they're going to be thinking, wow, there's an organization to this. There's a purpose and a goal and a direction, not just in the interview, but I'm going to have that in a role too. Of course, that also translates to, by the way, if you're coming on board as a cold caller, we also have management opportunities, and there's a structured path that you can take to get there. So generally speaking, a standard interview within what we call our employee hiring system is structured like this. You got the intro, which we already covered, the greeting, and then a company and personal overview, which we already covered. You want to address the last interview as well if it's the second interview. So we use a 2-stage minimum interview process, and that is so that I personally can free up my time at the beginning and not potentially waste time on candidates who aren't really a good fit for the company, so that my assistant will actually have that interview with them first and ask them all the personal questions. So because I talked about we have a 2-stage interview process where that's minimum, we could have a third as a tiebreaker, and I've shared with you what the introduction looks like for interview number 1, where you're just introducing yourself, you let them know you're going to get to know them personally a little bit, and you're answering those questions about the company. Preparation for the second interview, before we continue with this outline, is also really important. Preparation for that, regardless of what the position for, again, should always consist of reviewing those scheduling question sets ahead of time and then gaining a brief understanding of their work history with all the prep that's involved, so that by the time you jump on the interview, you'll be able to just straight up ask them. So I got a question. What, if anything, did you learn from the last interview that really stuck with you? Now, the reason we ask that question is because, again, I had mentioned we do things a little bit differently. We want to get to know them first on a personal level. Usually they're taken back in the first interview. So a lot of the responses that I get are, wow, I was just really impressed with the level of interest that you took in me personally. And then you give an overview of who you are if you haven't already, right? If you're just conducting both of these interviews, that's totally fine. Just, hey, I'm excited to be meeting with you again. Congratulations on getting selected for a second interview. This one's going to be a little bit different than the last interview that you had. Now understand that this is mainly what I do with virtual assistants, but I also do this with people who are stateside or person to person, and they can really appreciate that, because when it comes to virtual assistants, usually they aren't taken very seriously as people. They're just seen as cogs in the wheel, and that is not what they are. They're people too. So what I like to ask is, hey, did anything surprise you about the last interview? Now, they should share their biggest takeaway from interview 1 when scheduling the second interview, because I would recommend this for you in those scheduling question sets that we talked about for interview number 2. You ask them that question. Hey, what was a big takeaway from the first interview? So that by the time you're meeting with them, you already have an answer to that question, and you can just share with them, hey, I noticed that you wrote down that your biggest takeaway from the first interview was X. And then with that in mind, you can acknowledge their answer or the lack thereof. See, if they didn't actually answer those questions, that's telling. It's a very simple thing to do, to actually answer a couple questions that prepares you for the next interview or even the first one. So if they didn't answer the question, then I would say something like, hey, I see that you didn't actually mention what your big takeaway was. Tell me a little bit more about that, right? Or what was difficult about that question, right? And if they did answer it, then you can say, hey, I see that you mentioned your biggest takeaway was blank. Tell me more about that. So following simple instructions is really important. You already know this as a business owner. You don't want to hire somebody that's not going to follow those simple instructions. So this is one thing that's super critical, that's really going to separate the A's from the B players, that you're not going to want to have to waste any time discovering whether or not they're going to take action on your team with whatever role that they're being considered for. And that is homework that you provide them with on the first interview. For example, if they're a video editor, you want to hire them on your team to edit videos and make them really, really cool, like our awesome video editor here. We have a couple of them on this team. Then you want to make sure you give them just a small piece of homework. Say, hey, check out our channel or check out our videos on our website where it talks about, our team and our company. Whatever video, even if you don't have them and you're just starting out, show them a series of videos on a channel that you actually like, and then say, hey, take 5 minutes, record yourself, and turn this into something that looks like that, because that's what I'm going for. Now, if they're a cold caller or something, then the homework that they should have is something like, hey, go watch these videos, and something that you really like and have learned from and you leverage to get better at mastering your craft at cold calling or speaking with sellers on the phone, and then have them report back to you on the second interview, should they get a second interview, what they learned and what were big takeaways for them. And if they didn't do it, it'll be really, really obvious. And then that's one way in which you can really determine right out of the gate in the beginning of an interview whether or not that candidate is going to be a good fit. So the following up on homework is obviously something that's going to come. After that, you want to get into role plays or technical questions depending on the role. Now, technical questions, we'll go with the video editor stuff. Even if you yourself aren't an expert at video production, well, that's the reason why you're trying to look for somebody to hire, although I myself have been in that industry for a very long time, it came easier to me. But if it's a full stack developer or somebody that we've hired for ClickFunnels 2.0, which is new, so who can be an expert in that? You have to ask critical questions that you already know the answers to, that are going to guide your understanding of whether or not they know what they're talking about. Now, if you don't have the answers to those questions, be sure to do some prep work before you even put out a job ad to understand what a good qualified candidate for that role actually looks like so that you can. And when it comes to whether they're SMS sales reps, that's text message marketing within your business, then you can ask them questions and scenarios. So you can role play, whether it's a cold call position, a lead manager position, that actual interaction between them and the seller on the phone. So I'd recommend you always integrate something like that and then give them feedback based off of their performance. But what I would recommend you do is always lead from after the role play, hey, what do you feel like you did well? And then let them explain to you what they did well. And then say, well, where do you feel like you could have improved, right? And then on a scale of 1 to 10, based off of that role play and that interaction, where would you put yourself in terms of 1 being, I don't know what let's take lead manager, for example. I don't know what a lead manager is. I don't even know what their role is when it comes to real estate. Versus 10, I am the best and there's no room for improvement. Nobody can touch me. Now, obviously, they're not going to say 10. And if they say 10, then that's a red flag. If they say 1, then that's a red flag. But what I haven't shared yet is actually, even before you do the role play, I would recommend saying, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, before we jump into this role play, where would you put yourself on 1, I don't know what this is, and 10, I'm an expert and I have no room for improvement? And then see if it changes based off that interaction. Because one of the critical pieces to this, always make for a standard, my suggestion for your business is, for hiring somebody in that particular role, let the candidates know, not just in the job post, but also when you get to salary on the second interview towards the end, that you always make hiring decisions for salary based off of experience and based off of their abilities. So experience and abilities, obviously that's self-evident, but when it comes to potential, even if they have a lot of potential, you can't make a hiring decision for what you pay them based off their potential, but you can make a hiring decision based off potential if you can afford it in your business, if you can afford the time and effort and energy in training them. And hey, real quick, if you're in the niche of real estate investing, then you can actually check out our channel, and we have trainings on all this stuff that you can take your employees through to have them come from number 1 to number 9, right? Because they always have improvements that can be made. So check that out if you're looking to hire somebody in the real estate investing niche. Now, I should say that in most cases, when it comes to actually conducting these interviews, it will vary from person to person, but the outros are generally the same for the second interview. You can let them know we have a few minutes, about 5 minutes before it ends. So if you have any questions, now's the time to ask, right? And you can say, hey, great speaking with you again. Congrats on being selected again. We'll follow up with you on X amount of time. Let them know how long it's going to be before you follow up with them. So back to the first interview, when you're closing the first interview out, you want to let them know how long they should expect to hear from you as to whether or not you're going to give them a second interview. And then let them know, hey, I'm going to send you, just like the first one, some question sets when you're scheduling that second interview should you be selected for it. So please be sure that you complete the homework and you follow those instructions in that scheduling question set when you're scheduling the appointment for the second interview. Really appreciate your time. And one critical thing that you have to remember, that all of this stuff means nothing if you don't track your notes per interview from interview to interview. So that's why I think it's critical for you to check out this next video where we talk about the candidate evaluation matrix that helps you do just that. So click right here. You're not going to want to miss that, where we're going to make it easy.